Hello again. I'm always entertained to see people spreading fake history for political purposes, and recent publication by a group of mischievous troublemakers in the north of England is an example to savour of this kind of thing. The chief aim of what is described as a 5-year anti-racism and inclusion strategy and action plan for the City of York is to promote racism and make people believe that black people in York are receiving a raw deal. The cover alone features some favourite misleading statements. For instance, that black women are 4 times more likely to die from childbirth than white women, and also that British Muslims are not treated with dignity. I've observed before that because black women in Britain are more likely to be overweight than other ethnic groups, they suffer more from high blood pressure and other risk factors associated with things such as preeclampsia. Adjust the figures and compare white women and black women of similar weights, and the disproportionate number of deaths vanishes. As for Muslims not being treated with dignity, this simply means that not everybody kowtows to them in order to avoid being accused of Islamophobia, and that some of us hold Muslims to the same standards as members of other religions. I suppose that might be a little undignified for them. The introduction to this report, which I give a link in the description to this video, is very amusing. Let me read a couple of sentences. York has had a minority ethnic population since Roman times. For instance, black slaves were buried in the city around 200 AD, while other remains suggest there were high status and wealthy people in York from all over the Roman Empire, including North Africa. It has been suggested by one historian that at around that time the population of York, largely a military garrison town, was predominantly black. I would love to know who the historian is who says that Roman York was predominantly black, but unfortunately no reference is given. I suspect it might have been David Olusoga. There is no evidence that a single black person ever lived in York at the time of the Romans. This is a deliberate falsehood. There is some reason to suppose that a few skeletons there are of people from North Africa, but of course they were not black, they were probably Berbers or Phoenicians. The bit about high status and wealthy people refers to a single burial, that of the so-called Ivory Bangle lady. The only evidence that she might have come from Africa is that somebody thought that her skull was shaped a bit like some African skulls. No DNA or proper evidence. The idea about skull shape has proved horribly unreliable. We remember the beachy head woman who David Olusoga claimed was from sub-Saharan Africa. This was done on skull shape, but when a DNA test was carried out, she turned out to be European, probably from Cyprus. According to the 2021 census, non-white minorities make up just 7.2% of York's population, but this report claims that the true figure is 14%. They simply doubled the actual figure, presumably banking on the idea that few people bother to check statistics anyway. We are told, and I quote, "This work matters because the data widely documents that racism in York is systemic and structural. It is manifested in many forms that disproportionately and negatively impacts the lives and livelihoods of people of colour." Here's 3 examples. I'll give you the first example. In the last school year, there were 558 fixed-term exclusions. 5.6% of the exclusions were of minority ethnic background. Of these, 2% were Roma, Gypsy and Traveller background. This is a disproportionate number given their population within the school population as a whole. So 7% of the population of York are ethnic minorities, and fewer than that number are excluded from school. I'm not sure about the racism there. I don't quite get that. This attempt to portray York as being casually, systemically and structurally racist, as those who wrote the report claim, is essentially a fundraising gambit. Inclusive Equal Rights UK, who produced it, will help the council cure York of its racism for a price. Listen to the closing remarks. One question which has arisen during this exploration is why York's minority population has historically been low compared with many other areas nearby, and why it has grown rather more slowly. This may be changing, as witnessed by school pupil profiles. The question is whether York projects itself as a place where minorities would feel comfortable to live. There is not a strong sense to a casual observer that York is an attractive place to minorities. But do ethnic minorities have a prominent position in the life of the city? This may be an initiative that major organisations within the city can address together. And they give some actions relating to York's image. 1. To explore a deeper study of the city's image and history. 2. It's recommended constructing an independent research project. 3. A group of organisations to sponsor a review of the contributions of individuals to the life of the City of York. From all of which I understand that the people who wrote the report will be happy to lend a hand in all this and help give York the good housekeeping seal of approval for anti-racism, just as long as their advice is followed.